Ancient Roman poet philosopher Quintus Horatius Flaccus, better known as Horace, once said, "Adversity has the effect of eliciting talents, which in prosperous circumstances would have lain dormant." Hello, talking tacticians. Miazga is suspended. Nobody knows if Obi or Baji will be able to play. What talents are going to rise to the surface that otherwise might have stayed dormant? Let's talk about it together on this live version of Talking Tactics with Coach Gough. I'm so excited to be doing this, but let me first say, hey, everybody, and welcome in to Talking Tactics with Coach Gough. I am Coach Brad Gough, and this is a show where our true talent is to lie dormant until circumstances force us to do otherwise, and they are here. Circumstances, the main talent of CST has been given the night off. So luckily, I was able to drag Bryan Weigel out from his beer fridge, kicking and screaming to sit here with me. So let's welcome him into the show to help me host this sucker. Bryan, how are you doing on this fine evening?
I am doing wonderful. I don't know how I can live up to the high expectations or high standards of the one and only Justin Hoyt, but I felt like I had to throw like a bruv. Thanks for inviting me in here on this to give a little nod to my Arsenal man, but very happy and blessed to join you on this fine Monday evening.
Already catching flack from the listeners, Rupesh, letting us know that the reason why you're here is just because I couldn't find any better. It is true that it is the middle of the night for Justin, so he would probably be here otherwise. But you know, Bryan, with a long layoff between FC Cincinnati dispatching the Red Bulls of New York and us welcoming the Philadelphia Union into TQL Stadium, we are going to bring this special live recording of Talking Tactics instead of the main show, which I'm assuming will be back next week. If you don't know what Talking Tactics is, then you are in for either a treat or utter disappointment. But either way, you need to go search up Talking Tactics with Coach Gough and get subscribed to the podcast. Listen, folks, it's a win-win situation because either you love the show and you add it as a valuable part of your weekly FCC routine, or you hate it. And there's even more content with which to troll me and CST with in general. So really, what are you waiting for? Bryan, as we get this thing going and we start talking about the tactics of FC Cincinnati, maybe for the listeners out there that are hearing this on the main feed for the first time who have never listened to Talking Tactics, you know, how would you describe what Justin and I do over on the Talking Tactics feed?
Absolutely. Well, as most of y'all know, we have several different ways to explore FC Cincinnati coverage with CST. You have our main show on Monday nights where we take more like a 30,000 foot view. You have our Jersey Swap podcast where we talk to our opponents. And then we have Talking Tactics with Coach Gough and Justin, which dive into a wide variety of specifics from a player's perspective and from a coach's perspective. We go over the fine tactical adjustments versus maybe the grand theme of that match. And the offseason is my personal favorite, where Coach does his deep dives into the player signings, which we're going to have a ton of this upcoming year or this upcoming winter, I'm sure, because we're going to have a big roster overhaul, I'm expecting.
We're going to do 4 episodes, Bryan, on Sergio Santos returning because he's under contract.
Oh, yes.
So look forward to that.
Yes, I've been explaining this to people. They're like, "Oh, we're going to be getting all these forwards." I said, "Well, you still got like $1 million in Sergio Santos' contract there." So, but it's about how Coach can effectively, or how Coach Noonan or the GMs can effectively manage the players. It could be, what you've dealt with in your coaching career, and I'm a huge fan of the show because I don't get to think of all these little tiny nuances. I'm a U8 coach. I'm not a former college coach like you, and of course Justin in the Premier League, and so it's a great little thing that is, to me, it's one of the best soccer podcasts in North America.
Well, I certainly appreciate those kind of words, and you, always the professional, getting Jersey Swap and everything in there. I agree. I've told Jeff Tebbets, the host of Jersey Swap, before that I listen to his podcast, hopefully before I record the walkthrough, which is also on Talking Tactics feed, where Nate Gilman and I look at the upcoming opponent for FC Cincinnati. So, folks, if you want to hear Justin Hoyt and I break down the second Red Bull New York match, go back in the feed and look for the episode titled FC Cincinnati Advance, but at what cost? But as for tonight, I asked you all to give us some ideas of what you want to talk about. So we're going to get to those. And I thought I'd also run through some of the bigger tactical ideas that I've noticed from this team and kind of nerd out with y'all a little bit, so you can get a sense of what it means to talk tactics with Coach Gough. Then we'll finish up with listener questions. So be ready to type those into the chat. We already have some coming in. But before we get started, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Apollo Home. Apollo is a proud sponsor of CST. So if you're looking for a premium home service company for your plumbing, HVAC, or electrical needs, visit their website at apollohome.com. And hey, while you're doing that and while you're online or you have your phone out, please head on over to Twitter or Instagram and give me a follow. I am at FC Cincy Tac Talk. And as always, you can drop me a note at Cincy Soccer Talk or in the electronic mail slots at feedback@cincinnati-soccertalk.com. So let's hit the film room, Brian. Let's get right to it. Listen, there's 3 weeks off between this win over New York Red Bulls and the conference semis, and a lot of people have been talking about this. And so we got questions. Tom Backey in particular wants to know why, and why can't MLS do better? They have to plan like they're going to go to a game 3, right? If an FC Cincinnati finished it off in 2, and because they didn't want to cram this 3-game series into like a week and a half, it's a week per, that adds a week to the break. And then you have this pesky international break. So Brian, as someone who's plugged into this league, probably even more than I am, because, I'm too busy nerding out just watching the tactics. I have no idea what's going on in the league as a whole. Could MLS have even done anything about this? Could they have done better? Or is this just like a product of circumstances?
Well, it's the product of circumstances, but it's always happened in the history of the league. I remember they used to have like the first round games before the 1 seed. So like the 1 seed used to get a bye, and so all those teams would play their first series, and then they'd have a huge bye where the 1 seed was at a huge disadvantage because they wouldn't get any play for like 3 weeks, and then they had this huge break as well, like right before MLS Cup, the MLS Cup final. So it's always been a weird layout. I think with the roster congestion and everything that MLS has experienced this year with adding Leagues Cup, it's been very weird in how they structure everything. I do think that this 3-game series was wild, and they should hopefully never do it again. But it's always been the weird shtick because we're on that odd calendar with the rest of the world.
Yeah. And so, like, to me, the only thing, ideally, what they would have been able to do is plan so the international break was in between the conference final and the MLS Cup, because then you get that 2-week break that a lot of things do. But then you're talking about, making the season shorter or cramming more games into the season, and that becomes different as well.
But then you talk about that. Like, I'm a big fan of maybe doing like your first round and then your conference semifinal, and then you have a break and then conference final. With having 2 weeks off, you call it quote unquote 2 weeks off, but do we really want Junior Moreno to go play a game, or Bupenza flying over to Africa and then coming back and having 3 days before MLS Cup? So I don't know. I don't think there's a perfect way, but it's always been just a tough thing that we've always fought through here in the U.S.
Yeah, and I think it's just something that's going to continue to happen. And MLS is at fault because they're in America, I guess is what I would say. There's not a whole lot that they can do. They could do some things with like trying to, like I said, restructure the season, maybe not have Leagues Cup in the middle of it, and they could move MLS playoffs like entirely. But other than that, the international window is what it is. Mm-hmm. And I think finishing the Red Bull series off in 2 when you have to expect or plan as if it's going to go to 3 is the real culprit here. So they could fix some of this, like you said, Brian, if they don't continue to do that, which I'm with you. I think it sucked.
So here's the thing. Let's go. Jeff Reuter posted this today. There were 3 teams that are having the full 21-day break from their last game to their next game. So Cincinnati, LAFC Sporting did all their work early, 21 days. Then you got, you have Orlando that has an 18-day break. Philly has a 17-day break. Seattle 16, Houston 15, and Crew with 13. So you're going to have some of those guys like Crew, like Cucho, man. He played those 3 extra games. He's going to have to fly, play 2 international games, and come back on short rest and travel to Orlando. So that's not, a great situation to be in. At least we're at home.
Yeah, so let's talk about we talked about it, for Crew and for some of these, but let's talk about FC Cincinnati because you talked about that long layoff and if it is a good or a bad thing. I would say, from a player's perspective, I think they probably would have to think that it's a bad thing. I've talked to Justin about this in the past, and players when they are rolling, they just want to keep rolling.
Sure.
Of course, unless they're Obi or Baji, or maybe even Lucho with his heel, unless they're carrying a little bit of a knock, then they want that extra time to feel a little bit more right. From a coach, I think I would love that extra time. I'm in 21 days. You know how many good things I can do, Brian, in 21 days? I would start working out some of these kinks that we've seen. Things like the relationship of Ian Murphy and Alvaro Barreal when FCC is being pressed, because to me, it often looks like Murphy isn't sure whether to play the ball directly to Alvaro or to play it to Junior Moreno, that checking midfielder, when even though he's under severe pressure, and then trust him to have a good touch and lay it off to Barreal. So I call getting the ball wide to Barreal with a 3-player combo, right? Instead of straight to Barreal, go through Junior Moreno with that. It gives Alvaro that extra breath to then play forward. But Murphy seems to me like he's always a little bit sure, and speaking of Murphy, he's a little bit unsure. And speaking of Murphy, Brian, a lot of people said that they thought he played really terrible on both sides of the ball. I said on Talking Tactics that I thought he was actually pretty good defensively. Does he worry you back there? Especially, he's going to have to play a key role against Philadelphia Union, and they also like to press. Maybe not Red Bull style, but they're going to press. And you have to think Jim Curtin has his forwards queued up that when that ball goes to Murphy, press him hard because he so
For
often
sure.
looks like he's not quite sure.
Especially if Barrial's pinching up a little bit more, you're going to have to go after him.
Happens. What
Never
do you mean?
happens.
He's like a defensive stalwart back there.
Yeah, after that first match, I was actually a big fan of Ian Murphy's. I've always been a pretty good fan of Ian, but I thought he played pretty well. Of course, he's always going to have one or two of those mistakes. I mean, that's just the nature of he is. He's not a $1 million or Premier League loanee. I mean, he's draft pick from last year who's outperformed this past year's draft picks, mind you. So let's give him that a little bit. But yeah, he had a giveaway that led to I think the goal for New York in that second game. Overall, do I dare say he's a little bit better with his feet than Hagelin? He's a little faster. I think he's a decent fourth center back on most MLS clubs. Do I want him naturally? I think I'd love for him to be with Miazga next to Miazga. So we'll see how that relationship forms. But I mean, yes, he's going to worry me, but I would be a lot more nervous if I see a Hato or Joey Apunanu starting in that right center back role.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're dead on there. I think you do say that he has outperformed draft picks from this year because to me, Ian Murphy has been actually very good. And I think the problems that you see with him are the problems you see with young players. It is a problem of being unsure of what to do. It's not a problem of not having the skill. He doesn't have boneheaded plays like we're going to talk about some players who might also be playing center back a little later that sometimes just decide to tune out of the game for a play or two. He doesn't do that as often. He gets caught, his red cards earlier in the year, they were the right plays. He just took a half a second too long to make that decision. And so he gets there late. So it's a decision-making problem, which, you're going to have to take your lumps with young players. So do I love, like you said, that he's going to have to be back there next to Mascara, another young player probably who's going to play in the middle. I don't love that, but I think, I do trust him overall. I think he will be better. I haven't seen him put two terrible games together that often. Usually he bounces back because it's not a skill issue. Brian, another thing I would be working on, something that I'm really just super aggravated about from FC Cincinnati is their set pieces, because we had Alvaro Barreal having that straight volley banger off a corner. Lucho floats him that corner kick and he hits the volley in the Open Cup. And they've tried it like 5 more times and haven't even gotten a shot off because teams are expecting it. And other than that, you have, Lucho trying Olympicos every other corner kick. And if I'm a coach coming in with a 21-day break, that is probably number 1 on my list, is we are going to get some of this sorted out and put some more wrinkles in. Are you like me? Are you just like, these guys are too good to be this bad at set pieces, right?
I mean, we've conceded on set pieces on good deliveries and things like that too. So yeah, it's kind of frustrated me a little bit, but I feel like some of that is, hey, we got Gaddis, or hey, we got Alvaro, or not Alvaro, Alvis kind of falling asleep for a half second here or there. You're looking at guys, they're just gonna have to be locked on for 90 minutes. Philly's good in the air. Fortunately, they're going to be missing Glesnes, I think, which can kind of work out in our favor, both sides. I mean, you got Damian Lowe back there, who's a monster as well in the air, but is he very technical? No. I mean, this is, Philly is a very capable team. Very difficult to break down. So if we can, get Nick one off of set piece, I mean, I think that would be a dream in Noonan's eyes. I mean, I can't think of. I mean, you always used to Alvaro and Lucho breaking somebody down. So to be able to strike that way, I think that would be mentally difficult for that Philly team.
Yeah, when I see it, and obviously this isn't about the Philadelphia Union team or match in general, because I'm going to be talking about Miazga and Haglund and guys like that. But over the course of the season, when you see Mosquera, who can probably, high jump the goal, I think the way he runs, he's so athletic. When you see Miazga, when you see Nick Haglund, I just do not understand why they don't have more good opportunities and why they give up so many, to your point, defensively.
Well, Lucho can't get it past the first guy half the time, but other than that, oh wait, no,
he's trying to bank it off the first guy into the goal. That's the
problem. Talking about like Olympico style, kind of New York Red Bulls. Shoulda, coulda, woulda win.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda. So let's talk about the Union match then. You kind of toyed with it and you talked about call-ups and stuff. I want to put you on the spot. FCC and Union both had long layoffs. Union a few days less, but there's international matches in the middle. Who does this layoff benefit more?
I mean, I think FC Cincinnati, I would say clearly, because we got to figure out what's going on with our back line. You got to integrate those guys. You're going to give whoever's that right center back 3 weeks of time to figure his stuff out. And, you're not kind of giving them 3 days after a, short week kind of game. So I think that's a huge piece for FC Cincinnati. And then we'll see what happens with Obi. But, think about this. Right now we're missing Moreno, Bupenza, and Mosquera to international duty. And while I'm very excited that we're having a right center back training in there, he's not next to Mosquera. So we'll see if we can, get a little more comfortable in that time frame. Maybe they come up with a curveball somewhere, and Ian Murphy's in that center back role. That would be kind of scary, but you never know with those wrinkles there. Of course, Baji hopefully getting back into shape. Obina, Wobodo getting that time to rest and recover. I think that's a huge part for FC Cincinnati. On the opposite side with Philly, Jose Martinez is going to be with Moreno representing Venezuela. Daniel Gazdag's going to go over to Europe for Hungary, but I think their last game's like the 19th, so he's going to have plenty of time to fly back. And then, of course, you got Andre Blake and Damian Lowe. Not to undersell these two, but Jack McGlynn and Nathan Harriel are two US U23 guys that have been featuring a lot now with some of the injuries out there. Jack McGlynn, I think, started in the midfield. Harriel, I think, comes off the bench most cases as a fullback. You might see him start this upcoming game. But they're actually flying all the way over to Spain to do that Olympics camp for the U.S. So that's going to be a big deal for those guys, training for them, but also that they're not, integrated with the team during this break. So there's certainly a lot of moving pieces here, but just with that Red Bull game and how we got hurt, how we're trying to get guys back in, I think that really favors FCC.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then
or favors is probably the wrong word.
Yeah. But I think that if you get even more granular and you talk about also Pat Noonan and his coaching staff have also had less time with FCC than Jim Curtin has had with the Philadelphia Union. You have guys like that. How long has Curtin and Bedoya been at Union together? You know what I mean? Like pretty much since I started really following FC Cincinnati when they came into the league, right?
Yeah, but I mean, Philly also has 3 weeks to sit at home and worry about how Kai Wagner said some terrible things. Racism. You're talking about some of their issues with our players going to be coming back. Like Bedoya is like pissed.
Yeah.
I know Mbaizo was having some family issues getting his family back over from Africa. I don't know how that's weighing on people. So, I mean, they were not riding high going into these playoffs, and 3 weeks sitting at home, kind of, do they have that mental edge, or are they kind of like, God, just get done? I want to go to Cabo on a vacation. So it could work both ways. I mean, I think FCC is certainly going to be amped up, and you think a Jim Curtin side would be pretty happy, or pretty, positive. But I mean, there's been a lot of leaks coming out of that Philly camp, like mentality.
And Curtin's gone soft. You see him; he's all wearing his Prada jacket all the time. He's gone soft. I don't know. You don't see
fly. He wears the J's.
He's not going to catch Noonan wearing Prada. I don't think. Noonan's fine in his T-shirt from the team shop, right? The other thing listeners wanted to talk about, and we've talked about coming back and figuring out who's going to play in the middle. And we had Brett Sova, Paul Rahman, and others all desperately wanting us to talk about what this team is going to look like without Matt Miazga. So a quick rapid fire question, Bryan. Not who do you want to replace him, but who is going to replace him? Just like, what do you believe is going to happen?
You can't replace Matt Miazga. It's plain and simple. I mean, you can try to tactically cover up that massive hole that he's leaving, but I mean, Mosquera is going to be on international duty. I assume that he would slide over. I mean, Coach, you might be thinking something different here. I think you and I both have different takes on who I would want, or who we would want is to maybe slide over to that right center back spot. I mean, personally, even though I don't love him going forward, but Ray Gaddis, I am a huge Ray Gaddis defensive person. He's going to fulfill his defensive responsibilities first and foremost. He played very well versus New York. We're sacrificing his abilities in the air, but come on, let's be real. Avis Powell doesn't do anything in the air either. So yeah, I mean, it's just, is it a whole tactical shift where we pull our guys back, our midfielders back a little bit and concede maybe some more space for Philly to come into? I mean, there's so many tactical juggling balls that Coach Noonan's going to have to go with here, but there's certainly no way to make up for a Matt Miazga easily. Coach, if you're there, I mean, what do you do? Just say, hey, who's going to be the ish talker? Who's going to be the destroyer? What are you divvying up personality traits? What are you doing?
Can I throw it into reverse and go back to the middle of the season and do something differently? Because, I think this is one case. And listen, I love Pat Noonan. I love him. I would, I would take him to the prom tomorrow if I could. But he, I think, kind of made a mistake here. Back when Matt Miazga missed time in the middle of the season, when there was a stretch of games when he was not able to play. August 20th, he didn't play against Columbus because he was out suspended. But then June 21st through the July 12th, there were 5 matches in a row where he was out of the lineup. And I was saying at that time, talking to Justin, if I was Coach Noonan, I would be bringing in Joey Appanuna, who's playing center of the back three for FCC2. And I would have him play there in these games because I would say, it would absolutely be a weaker team with him out there than rolling with what they often did, which was it was Murphy, Mosquera, and Hagland, right? But one, you're preparing the kid for later in the season when you might need him, aka now, but also you're only getting weaker at one spot, right? You leave Mosquera on the right where he's strong. You leave Murphy on the left, or you leave Hagland on the right and Mosquera on the left. Whatever you decide to do, you leave them in their positions and you keep them playing, and you just make the one change. I know, Rupesh, that Joey did not look good in the 2 games, and that's the caveat, right? I'm not there day in and day out. And so clearly Coach Noonan decided that Joey was not ready. And so, you have to respect that. But I'm just wishing desperately now that, when FCC had a 2-2 draw at Charlotte, 2-2 draw at home versus New England, 3-0 loss at DC United, some of those games, maybe that DC United game, were games that Joey could have gotten some minutes, and I don't think it would have gotten worse for them.
Yeah.
But all in all, go ahead.
Well, I would say, let's be real, like even taking it back a little bit further. We've been clamoring for another center back in the offseason in the summer window, and this comes down to while Chris Albright did an amazing job putting this roster together, we've still been hampered with some boneheaded contracts. Let's be real. I mean, you're out there paying Kubo and even Santos way too much money. That could have been, instead of bringing Brett Halsey, who's my boy and he's kicking butt. Imagine if you could have brought in a $300,000-$400,000 center back. I mean, which is never. I mean, he's never going to be a great. That person's probably never going to be a great player, but serviceable enough. So this is just kind of also goes down to those roster mechanisms. I mean, I don't want to poo-poo on Joey or Hato too much, but I mean, that's a lot to ask. And even the fact how well Murphy played to this point has been outstanding. But I mean, it's an imperfect system that we're fighting against.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And you have to think, though, that getting back to the situation that is at hand with Matt Miazga missing, you have to think that when the coaching staff's looking or the GM's looking and they're not bringing in another center back, you have to think, who is the fifth center back that they're assuming might need to play? You play 3 center backs, you're going to need more than 4.
Sure.
Alvis Powell was always slated to be that 5th center back, right?
I mean, he certainly looked that way at the beginning of the year. I think he was taken advantage of in that Miami game, and I think that's where all my PTSD's coming from. How he faltered kind of down the stretch in that U.S. Open Cup semifinal. He's signed for next year, so I guess he is our 5th center back potentially. And but I mean, I see with the attack that Philly has and how I think it gives us a little bit more flexibility if you can put Gaddis in there and then potentially, bring Alvis Powell on later in a different role. I don't know, man. It's just a shame, really, how all this played out.
Yeah, and you talk about tactically what to do here. You kind of have 2 different options, right? You rotate your pieces and you plug and play and say, we are who we are. And if we lose because Matt Miazga was a doofus, then that's something we have to look at going forward.
He was framed. He was framed.
Right. Well, but shockingly, nobody thought Matt Miazga was a doofus. So why would you even need another center back? I mean, Matt Miazga is not going to get yellow card accumulation, red card, nothing. Nobody knows that about Matt. So this was shocking to everybody, right?
Didn't fight that at all down the stretch. I love it.
Plug and play, or you do what you talked about. You sit those midfielders back a little bit deeper, maybe one of the 2, Moreno or Obi, and you try to protect that back 4. The problem with doing that is it's going to change how you press, and pressing is such a big part of FC Cincinnati's game plan, and we're going to get to that later in the show. So one thing you said that I just want to pick on is you said Alvis Powell doesn't do much in the air. I will say, the last time he played at center back, he played left center back in the 2-1 win at the New York Red Bulls on July 12th. And he was 4 of 5 in aerial duels that match. So you got to imagine, even if he is not the best player in the air, he's better than, 5'1" Ray Gaddis out there who can't jump because it might untuck his jersey, right?
Ouch. That's a personal attack. And I don't think I can stand here.
Yeah, actually, I want to take that back, listeners. Pretend you didn't hear that. Strike that from the record, because I love Ray. Ray was on an episode of Talking Tactics last season where we talked about like his faith and what it means for him in terms of his ability to come play at FC Cincinnati and kind of be that guy in the locker room. So like Ray, I'm rooting for Ray harder than anybody. And honestly, as a coach, if I am coaching the team, I think I probably put Ray Gaddis out there. As a fan, I think I look at Powell's athleticism and I think, honestly, the team gets faster without Hagelin and Miazga on the pitch if you have Murphy, Mosquera, and Powell, right? Sure. And I think about some of those things as a fan and limiting, Mikel Ura running in behind because he loves to do that slashing in behind. But Ray is just the consummate pro. You don't expect him to beat himself. But if he's not beating himself and he's still getting dunked on when, a center back or is up into the attack or he's asking to be defending a corner or, a cross comes in and he's got to be quicker to the spot than a guy like Mikel Ura, he might not beat himself, but the other guy might just beat him because the physical tools aren't always there. But I made the argument for Powell as a center back. I talked about, his athleticism, the fact that I think that he was set up to be the fifth center back on this team. But you'd rather see Gaddis out there. So tell me, preach the gospel of Ray. Why are you starting Ray Gaddis if it's up to you?
Personally, I think his form's been a little bit better than Powell kind of down the stretch here. It's not the aerial presence. It's more of, hey, if there's a 2-on-3 or a 3-on-3 versus our 3 center backs, who do I want out there? Do I want Ray Gaddis being a little bit more defensive quality than Alvis Powell? Or do I want, Alvis Powell who can go track that runner? I think at the end of the day, with the unknowns about Moreno's fitness, is he going to be able to play 90 after doing the international matches? Is Obi playing? I just think I want that extra tool there with Ray, and just, that smidge better defensive ability than Alvis.
Yeah, well, Elizabeth Wagner, who's listening live, agrees with you, puts Ray back there for his consistency. Rupesh wants to know if 3 weeks is enough time to change to a back four if needed. I would say categorically no, it is not enough time. Everything is different, from your pressure cover cues, like who's going to step to the ball and who's going to drop in, to the way you shift right and left, to your ability to send your wingbacks forward. So it's going to even affect the way you attack. I think there's just too many moving parts. If they had been going in and out of that all season, maybe they play mostly 3-5-2, but they play 4-4-2 diamond, a handful of times, then I would say maybe. But as it stands, I would be shocked and appalled if Coach Noonan decided to do that.
Hey, Alan Koch disagrees with you, pal. Man, talking about that was so much shade right there. Just switching like a 3 and a 4 and a 2, and oh my god,
I don't mind. No if
more
Alan
PTSD.
Koch disagrees with me.
No more PTSD there.
So listen,
oh shoot,
is losing Matt Miazga as big a deal as everybody makes it sound? First of all, I will say I agree with you. Nobody is replacing him. There's too much that he brings from a leadership perspective. However, I will say you hear all these statistics, like the fact that Matt Miazga has started 36 games and the team has only allowed 35 goals in that time. And they've allowed, more than a goal a game when he's not out there. But when you look at those games, I talked about that stretch from June 21st to the July 12th where he didn't start. They gave up 8 goals in those 5 matches, and it seems crazy, right? But you also talk about one of those matches, Brian, was Nick Hagland starting in between Ray Gaddis and Alvis Powell, I think, or maybe it was.
Was this Ray a Yacht Stomp coach team? You sure?
Exactly.
No
so
I
you gotta take this with a caveat, right? And also Mosquera playing in the middle was not very good in many of those matches. And I said it on Talking Tactics at the time. He was too aggressive stepping into the midfield. As the center of that back three, you have to be moving the pieces. You have to be telling your outside center backs when to step and when to follow forwards. The only time you go is when you can win the ball, because it creates a hole in the middle of your defense. You step forward, those other 2 outside center backs are supposed to kind of tuck in behind you and make like a tight triangle. But it doesn't always happen perfect. And then it allows those wingers or a second forward to make those darting runs that we know Philadelphia Union love to make and get those balls in behind. And Mosquera was getting out too aggressive, tucking into the middle. And I think the last time that he played in the center back was that 3-0 win over Charlotte at home. And he was pretty fantastic. I was super impressed with him in that game. Brian, do you recall that game? And do you remember thinking like, man, this is a guy who has really started to learn that he can do different things than just be all speed, all tackling all the time?
I'll be honest with you. I think that was the game where Lucho Acosta was just an amazing individual and had that incredible goal. That's what I think of when I hear that Charlotte game. But I mean, overall, let's be real. Mosquera is still a top 5, top 10 at worst case center back in this league. My issue is, are we going to be composed under that pressure, and will he be able to help pass us out of that press? And in all honesty, I mean, I think defensively we should be fine. It's giving the ball over sloppily, being careless, and if he's able to help relieve that pressure, and Moreno's not turning the ball over carelessly like he was in a couple of those New York games, I think we'll be fine. At the end of the day, he's athletic. I think he matches up well against all of the attackers of Philadelphia. And I mean, let's be real. I mean, we're all going to miss this guy next year.
Yeah, and I will say, if you ask me to describe the profile of the perfect central defender in a back three, so the middle center back, I would say you want a guy that's really fast because he's going to have to drop a bit
Sure.
deep and play sweeper at time. A guy who's comfortable going to ground and making a last ditch tackle to save a shot, to block a shot or save a goal. And those are things Mosquera is fantastic at. The other thing I would say though is he's got to really know how to organize his teammates, and that's the one that I worry about. Um, I will say this about Matt Miazga. You know, we talked about the amount he does on the field and organizing. He also drives fans, drives me a little bit crazy. You've heard this statistic. He has 11 yellow cards and only 3 of them are for tackles. And I've also gotten a lot of questions from listeners as a coach. What would I do about this? Would I like institute a rule that only the captain, the guy wearing the armband, can talk to the ref and things like that? I think because these are professionals, you can't really do a lot of that. So I'm a little bit at a loss, Brian, because I don't know. I think it's just kind of one of those things you take your lumps. Like, he's going to play with fire. It's part of what makes him great. And having him as the villain on your team, as long as he doesn't cross that line too often, is a good thing. Now, you hope that he doesn't cross that line in a freaking playoff match, you know. But what about you? What do you do if you're coaching? What if you have your U8s out there? You got any guys out there that are like measuring up the other little 7, 8-year-olds, being like, "You're not tall enough to play, get off my field," and talking smack? What do you do as a coach?
Oh my lord! Most of my discipline is because they don't listen. So that's actually pretty good with Matt in this case, not listening like an 8-year-old. Uh, in all fairness, I think I've said this on every show. My track record's clear. If you want to listen to every CST, I want an Ishtar like Matt Miazga on my team. We've been asking for it for 3 seasons when we were the last place team, and I'm going to take the lumps when they come. Again, like, go in the locker room. No, that's probably not something you should do. And there's some personal responsibility that he's going to have to account for, most likely. Laurel was reporting some stuff in her mailbag. I don't want to spoil any of that. If you guys want to go check that out, please feel free to go subscribe to her Patreon. But man, I'm a huge Matt Miazga fan. I put this thing up on Twitter today about how genuine of a person he is in our brief interactions we've had. He came on our live show last year at Samuel Adams Brewery, and was an incredible person. He's been invested in this club. I've had zero doubts about his effort and commitment for this club. At the end of the day, he was sticking up for a crap referee job that should be exploited. That should be the thing that everybody on Twitter is shouting out how bad and how poorly that officiated that game was, how that official lost the game. And maybe it is not his job to go and call that out, but I really think that at the end of the day, I want that guy on my team. I want him fighting for us. I just hope it costs him in his checkbook and not games versus Columbus or Orlando. So
Yeah,
sorry about
definitely.
that.
And, I will also say that that center official in that match is roundly known as one of the only officials that will talk down to people, including players, coaching staffs, like, not just be like, "You need to shut your mouth," but actually talk down to them, as if like they shouldn't be approaching him when he is on the field. So he kind of has that reputation. So I agree with you there. You know what, Ryan? I am going to read a promo here, and then we're going to come back and talk about some more nitty gritty tactics stuff. Okay. Because I need to tell the listeners that Beyond Exercise is a local physical therapy and fitness business that helps anyone get active and stay active. In fact, they help Nick Haglin and Brandon Vasquez with their physical therapy and strength training needs during the off season. And currently they are offering a $50 discount for their new ACL injury prevention screen, which was piloted by Nick and Brandon. And as a coach, a former college coach, I will tell you, everybody should be doing this work of like learning how to land, learning how to jump to keep those knees safe. You can learn more at gobeyondexercise.com. And because this is what I do on Talking Tactics, I also right now get to let you all know that this episode is unofficially brought to you by the Shadow of a Doubt Imperial Porter out of the Russian River Brewing Company. Now, listen, Russian River is the brewery that puts out such renowned beers as Pliny the Elder and Pliny the Younger. So you might have heard of them. They're only out here in California. So if you ever come out this way, you got to check this porter out, because even though it's nothing fancy, It's pretty much the best straightforward porter I have ever had. There's tons of roasted malt, subtle undertones of milk chocolate and caramel, and really just the right amount of sweetness. And I gave it the rare full marks, 5 out of 5. So to see that review and get all of my soccer content, check me out on Twitter at FC Cincy Tac Talk. If you have a question or comment, you can get at me there. Send me a note to feedback@cincinnati-soccertalk.com. All right, Brian. A question here from Brett Sova about what 3 beers TQL should add to make the match day experience even better. And I don't get to TQL often. You know, I just mentioned I live out here in California. So I'm going to mention some of the best year-round Cincy brews that I know of. And Brian, you can shoot me down and tell me why everybody should just be drinking. What did I see you have tonight? Was that a Coors Light? What do you have?
I'm a bourbon guy. So my
I'm
beer
just
selection,
messing with you.
tonight I got a Hellas Real, our friends at Grainworks in Norden,
Nice.
supporters group. So this is my go-to, definitely my go-to. But if I'm at a game, actually, traditionally I get the Coors Banquet beer. So over in the Coors Light area.
Nice.
So
Going
no,
Coors heavy. I like it.
It's not nice, but yeah, it is what it is. I like it. Most of the
Um,
time I'm with my family, so I can't get, blackout like I used to in the old Nipper days, but it is what it is. I like a good hazy IPA if there's one.
I hear you. I appreciate you going beer just for talking tactics when normally you would have a bourbon in
Hey,
hand.
100%.
I'm about to make Rupesh pretty unhappy here because he doesn't want to have any crew supporting beer companies listed. But I'm going just, with the Cincinnati brewing companies. I would say for IPAs, I love Rheingeist's Pure Fury and Space Vibes. I have no idea if they're at TQL. If not, they should be. For New England IPAs, you get the Fluffy Wuffy out of Taft's. I don't know if they even make it anymore, but it's like it tastes like you're drinking a marshmallow, Brian. So good.
Pour one out for Taft's, man. Taft's OTR is closing in 2 weeks.
I don't know if I can record the rest of the show.
I think it might be the last day. I think it's going to be the last FCC home game day, the 25th.
Wow. Okay. Well, definitely pour one out there. And if you can find cases of Fluffy Wuffy, please save me. Save me some. I also like the HBC 586 out of Rebel Metal. If you haven't been to Rebel Metal Brewery, it's a pretty good one downtown. To throw out a lager for good measure, Mad Tree's Koru Kolsch is pretty good. And Brian, of course, Coors Banquet, end of the story. It's the only way to go, really. And I guess we don't have to mention Heineken, right? Because we're not officially an MLS podcast. We only got to do that.
No.
Okay, great. So let's just move on. And let's nerd out a little bit about how FC Cincinnati breaks presses, specifically with Lucho Acosta. Yeah, well, what I love about this, Philly is going to press, so something to give the listeners to look out for. I love how not only does FC Cincinnati work the ball well to break the press, but they do it intentionally to get the ball at the foot of Lucho Acosta. It's not just let's move the ball into space, look for the open player, play that man and get going, but it's worked out in a way to get the ball to Lucho's feet. So as FCC work the ball around the back with their center backs, you look at the spacing between, I'm just going to say Junior Moreno and Obi Wobodo, basically the two defensive center mids there. And it's key because Junior always stays on the left and Obi always stays on the right. So there's 2 options from there. Either the wing back that the ball is swinging to that side stays really high, and that defensive center mid on that side comes short, checking to that outside center back that's receiving the ball, or the wing back checks short and the center defensive midfielder on the opposite side pushes a little bit high to try to loosen up that midfield. So you look at that spacing and then watch what Lucho does. Lucho checks towards that sideline. And if the wing back is high, he'll come all the way to the sideline and give the outside center back who's receiving the ball an option to play it to him directly or to play it through that defensive center mid, like I talked about the 3-player combo. So like into Obi's feet, out to Lucho on the sideline, right? And then he can either give it right back to that DCM or play it forward, looking for those 1-2s. If the wing back is still checked short, then he will check in where that near side central defensive midfielder is checking. So in this case, we'll say the ball is going to the FCC right. It's Obi. Lucho will actually check in right behind Obi there. And so the center back there, usually Mosquera, it's going to be somebody else, maybe Ray Gaddis in this case, will be looking to either split that past Obi into Lucho's feet, or playing the ball to the wing back, who then can tuck it inside to Lucho. So either way, you're working with these 3-player combos to get the ball to Lucho's feet. And Lucho's movement is generally like checking towards the ball as it cycles. So he's checking kind of in a circular motion. And I'm going to be the worst kind of soccer analyst here, because I'm going to bring in a different sport. And I'm going to say it reminds me of ice hockey. If you watch ice hockey, when the guys get the ball behind, or get the puck, see, I'm terrible already, get the puck behind the net, you'll see the center do this circle motion. And the idea is that guy can play it straight to the center, peeling away from the goal. And so he's going the way he wants to go, or they can play it up to the wing, or in this case, the wing back, right? Who can then just either take the puck straight off the wall, take the ball straight off the sideline, and get it into that guy's feet, facing the way he wants to go. And I think Pat Noonan has the guys doing this really well. Was that totally confusing, or does that make a little bit of sense?
Well, I think for us, how is Philly going to play? How are they going to press? Are they going to push us wide and try to get us to play through those midfielders a little bit more and maybe exploit some of Junior Moreno's iffy passing stats? Or are they going to just clog the middle, make it hard for Lucha to get on the ball, and have Arias and Barreal beat you? I mean, it's a tough situation for Philly for sure. But I keep going back and thinking, okay, how can we beat that press a little bit better? How can we take advantage of, creating more space for us and getting Bupenza on the ball more? And, do we perhaps put in a Yuya Kubo over Junior Moreno in the midfield? Could he maybe help us relieve a little bit of pressure a little bit more? I know you don't want to mix too many things going into the playoffs, but just kind of percolating out there. I thought how we passed was actually pretty good versus New York. We were spraying them out, creating some space. Can we do that versus a superior midfield with Martinez there for Philly?
Yeah, I think that the way that FC Cincinnati likes to break that press actually is pretty suited to the way Philadelphia Union, I think, are going to have to play. The way Philadelphia Union has played FC Cincinnati in the past is they have matched our formation generally. They've gone to 3 center backs, at least the past couple times. I don't think they're going to be able to do that with
They don't have
Jakob
the
Glesnes.
Yep. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
just gonna say they
exactly.
don't have the people to do so. I think, and again, it's kind of maybe tough to compare, but do you think playing New York twice gives us a little bit more of an advantage coming off those 2 right into Philly?
Yeah, I do think so, because it's not an analog, right? It's not same,
Sure.
but Philadelphia does like to press. They like to create chances either from pressing and winning the ball, or from getting in behind the defense quickly, 2 things that Red Bulls like to do. Now, Red Bulls obviously are a lot sloppier at it, because they don't mind just like hit it forward. And if it doesn't make it through, we'll get on the second ball, or we'll run into somebody and fall down and hold our face and hope to get a free kick, right? Philly's going to do a little bit less of that. But I do think that those similar patterns that we saw against Red Bull, and that I just outlined with the way Lucho checks and makes that circular run, and the way we try to get the ball to the wing backs through a midfielder as opposed to playing it straight to them, I think that actually is really good against the Union, because if they press out of a 4-4-2 diamond, if you play the ball directly to the wing back, they collapse on that wing back. But
Mhm.
if you play the ball to a Junior Moreno or an Obi Wobodo, and you force that shuttler, the side of the diamond there, to hold just a second to make sure he doesn't turn and play forward, and
Mhm.
then play to the wing back, that gives that wing back an extra second. And that extra breath is so valuable to then find Lucho going forward, to find Aaron
Well,
Bupenza checking in and linking up play.
I was gonna say, if you can bypass that midfield, I mean, you're good. You could get your numbers advantage fairly quickly. So, and God, I mean, who doesn't salivate over the fact that Arias or Barreal running at somebody and then having that later on pass to Lucho versus having it at the midfield?
Yeah, exactly. So I do think your point of playing Red Bulls actually being a good thing. I was on record as saying I did not want to play them. I was hoping that
Nobody
they would
did.
lose. I don't know. Somebody in our chat, I forget, in the CST Slack chat, was saying that they preferred Red Bulls. Something about like karma and beating them again in the
So
playoffs.
I
And
actually said that I think that, and this is something we can talk about a little bit later, but I said I thought Charlotte offered better top end quality than Red Bulls.
Ah, I see. Yeah, and I think that probably is right. I think the big question, and I don't want to keep coming back to this, but does not having Matt Miazga make the difference in that press break? You talked about the passing, and that is an underrated part of Miazga's game. He can really hit those long balls to skip that midfield and put a pretty good ball into a Brandon Vasquez or an Aaron Bupenza when you give him time. I'm not sure. I think Mosquera can do that. That tool is in his bag, but he doesn't do it as often. And I feel like when he hits those long balls, they float a little bit. He doesn't drive them in like Miazga does, which is going to allow like a Lowe or an Elliott to come over and try to win that ball out of the air instead of having Vasquez bringing it down on his chest or whatever.
Why do I have this feeling that we're going to see Mosquera get on the ball and then go with like 30 yards forward, and everyone's going to be like, no, no. And then it's going to hit the right pass, and everyone's going to be like, yes, yes, let's go. I can totally see that out of our match. Oh, I know.
Yeah, that play where he got played short to the corner by Roman against Red Bulls, and he was under hard pressure, and instead of just wasting it, he cut the defender and carried forward. I seriously like on the edge of my seat about to cuss him out, and then he made it, and I was like, "Oh, great play, Yerson. That was fantastic. Well done, sir."
The center shooting the half court shot.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about the other side, about how FC Cincinnati like to press. Because I think it's kind of interesting. And what's really interesting about this is the Philadelphia Union press the exact same way. It's almost like this coaching DNA has some intermingling there or something. They do is they split their two forwards wide, and they have their attacking midfielder, so Lucho or Gazdag, press forward. And then they have their holding midfielders. It's a little bit different in Philly now because they're doing a 4-4-2 diamond. So it's typically their shuttlers, but they have one push up high and one sit back deeper. And the goal is to get the opponent to pick a side. You know, Lucho will shade that ball to one side. As soon as the opponent picks the side, they collapse the field to that side. And having, in our case, it's usually Obi high up, allows him to press the midfielder that's on that ball side immediately. So the problems happen when an opponent can make a run to pull Obi out of the passing lane, and then they bypass that pressure into that space that Junior Moreno is supposed to have shifted over and occupy. And I think that's a huge reason, again, to come back to Yerson Mosquera playing in the middle. He's going to have to be good in this match, because when that happens, we saw it against Atlanta with Almada finding so much space in behind the midfield of FC Cincinnati and in front of the center backs. Those center backs have to collapse that space at the right time when that press is beat.
Yeah, no doubt. Now with our pressure, I guess, I'm very conservative in this side, picking the right times. I'm not sure I want like a Dom Baji. Like, I know we started Dom Baji doing that pressure role versus New York, and I know he brings a lot of that defensive pressure that Boop necessarily doesn't. But I'm almost kind of like, I want Boop in this game a little bit more to kind of maybe sit back, or have Vasquez sit back a little bit more, absorb, and then counter, kind of what we did maybe a little bit more last year. Man, there's so many little nuances with the different types of players that we can bring in, on how we're able to see this game out and affect that play. Because I mean, does Carranza play for Philly? Is he going to be able to get that? And if he's in there, it's a whole different animal for FC Cincinnati to step up and face a three-headed monster with Ura, Carranza, and Gazdag. Yeah, we'll see what happens when Obi's there or not. If we have what's his face? Pinto
Angulo,
or whoever,
Angulo,
Pinto,
Kubo.
Okay, if Angulo's in the 11, I will have about 5 or 6 banquet beers before the game.
with bourbon mixed in, because you can need something more than the
I do have a bourbon pouring station right behind my seat, so if anybody wants to come over there.
There you go. If things get bad, visit Bryan Weigel, and you can buy him a bourbon to drown your sorrows together in. Right. I would expect Noonan, assuming, we're making a lot of assumptions here, but assuming Obi's good to go, Junior Moreno doesn't get hurt on international duty, those sorts of things, I'd expect him to not make any changes to the press. I don't think he'll have this team sit back. They're playing at home. I think that the guys he has out there are good enough to get the job done.
Baji or Boop, though?
Yeah, I'm 100% with you that I think Bupenza is the guy for this match. Like you said, Dom Baji running forward, mixing it up, getting into aerial duels with Red Bulls was important. What Bupenza does is defensively, he will drop back and kind of sit in that hole, kind of like where an attacking midfielder might be, which one allows Lucho Acosta to kind of roam a little bit more, but two, it puts him in a position to link up quickly. Now, whether when he gets the ball, he can actually link that play, I know he can, but whether he does is a whole different story. But we saw it work beautifully when the ball went to him and he tucked it under his legs to Lucho, right? And then spun off and ended up getting that shot to tie the game against Red Bull. So it can work. We just need to see it more. But I do think that Boop is the guy to start there.
Amen.
Yeah. So the good news
my
is
twin brother might disagree with you.
We shall not mention him. Rupesh already told me I'm worse than all Weigels, and I already know that we have the better Weigel on. So if we bring Brad up, I'm just dropping down the pecking order here. The good news is that if Powell starts, there's more speed on the back line. So you won't have to worry about as much if your Mascara gets caught too far forward trying to plug up that hole, that ball going over the top. You have Murphy and Powell. They're not going to get beat for pace by many guys. I think even Ura is pretty quick, but I think Murphy and Powell are probably just about as quick as him, if not maybe close. So it's that time in the show when I'm going to take a minute to thank everybody for being here. We have lots of listeners online, which I love. Thanks for getting online and subscribing to Talking Tactics with Coach Gough. If you're not subscribed already, thank you in advance for doing that. And thanks for telling everybody about Talking Tactics, for downloading, for listening, for spreading the word. Make sure that you get on applepodcast.com/ or CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/Coach Apple Podcast to rate and review the show. I want to shout out to Quanch, FCC Fan Jr., and Puddle Jumper 4456, who all left me reviews, and we really appreciate that. And then also make sure, if you like what we do here week in and week out with the articles, with the podcast, consider becoming a supporter of Cincinnati Soccer Talk over at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support. When I put the rundowns together for Talking Tactics, Brian, I ask the listeners to make the rundown for me. I ask you all, what do you want to talk about? And I talk about the games based on that. So make sure if you have questions, whether it's for me, whether it's about tactics, or if you want Justin Hoyt to talk about a player's perspective, you can always get at us on Twitter or Instagram, or drop us a note in the mailbag. And speaking of the mailbag, for this segment, we want you've already been putting some questions in there. I'm going to turn the mic over to Brian to host, and we're going to have, maybe 5 minutes here of short question and answer session, and hopefully get some questions answered. Brian, what do you got for me today?
All right. So here, this is a personal question from my side. There's been a lot talked about comparing FC Cincinnati to St. Louis this postseason, I guess we'll say, because you're talking about MVP Berkey versus Lucho, Coach of the Year Carnell versus Noonan, first in the East, first in the West. How St. Louis did as an expansion team this year. My thought process, and I think we see it a little bit more now versus maybe 5 or 10 years ago in Major League Soccer, but is style of play more important to you, or is having that quality, especially a guy like Lucho, somebody that's able to break down a very well-shaped team, very well-formed team, and to make that overall difference in the match? I mean, you saw the number 1 team in the West go down to an 8th seed who snuck into the playoffs at the last minute.
Yeah, I think that what you're getting at also is a little bit of this question about what is more valuable, Supporter Shield or MLS Cup. And let me connect those dots. Over the course of a season, style of play is going to get you pretty far. You're going to be able to really have an identity, play the same way on the road or at home, and kind of have your will happen. And that's going to tie you games that you might otherwise have lost. It's going to win you some of those games that you might have drew. But when it comes to one-off games or even a best of 3 series, you have to have that individual quality step up. And you've seen at times, Lucho Acosta has drug FC Cincinnati to victories or to draws, right? With that individual quality over the course of a whole season. losing a game because your style didn't play out well that game, or some guys had an off night, doesn't hurt you as much. You can still go be a number one seed in the West, or maybe even win a Supporters Shield. In one-off games, you just can't have that. You play a team like New York Red Bulls who just want to muck things up. You play in Orlando who just wants to sit behind the ball and force you to try to break them down. If that doesn't suit your style, all of a sudden it's a bad matchup for you. And if you don't have the talent to rise to the top and go make things happen, I think that you can't win those games. So I think that's why you see teams like that are really style heavy. New York Red Bulls, St. Louis, I think is going to be the same way. Nashville, you see them not advance in the playoffs because of those things, even though they have generally decent seasons.
Well, you even look at some of those teams and their ability to shape their whole culture of their roster. When they do add a great player, that player has struggled. You're not able to create chances always around them if you're, frantically pressing and not having a dedicated build out pattern, if you're counterattack. So Emil Forsberg apparently is coming to New York Red Bull. So I'm very interested to see how that level of player is going to impact, even though he'll be very well versed in the Red Bull style, mucking it up. But we'll see. Another question we had here from Rupesh is, what is the bigger loss? Is Kai Wagner the bigger loss, the creative fullback for Philly, or Matt Miazga?
I think Matt Miazga is the bigger loss in that situation, because playing in the center of a back three is a spine position. It's such an important spot. And what FCC you're going to see them do is pull a player from right center back and Yersa Mosquera to plug him in. So now you're changing two positions. You're making Mosquera not quite as effective. Even if he's really good, he won't be as good as he was at right center back. And you're bringing a new one with Kai Wagner, even though he is so important to the way Philly attack, and especially to their set pieces. And that will make a difference. I don't think it's quite the level of Matt Miazga, because you're talking about a 1-for-1 swap. You bring in another guy to play that position, and maybe you can't attack the exact same way, but they're doing similar things.
All right. Final question for me here. A big announcement this past week was the Goal of the Year award was awarded to Lucho Acosta and his amazing goal versus Charlotte FC. But there's a lot of chatter out of Philadelphia from an amazing goal by Martinez. I think it was versus us, a long distance shot. So tell me, what is the more important goal? And of course, why was it Lucho's that actually won?
So, as a fan, when you see a thunder strike just like go in from downtown, like you can't help, you like stand up, you have big eyes, you like, do the thing where you bite your fist, right? And it's amazing. And I get why people love those goals. But number one, they are mostly luck, right? Sure, you have to be able to hit that ball, but how many times does Martinez try that throughout a season and put that into row Z, as Justin would say? And I will tell you, lots of times. So, a broken clock is right twice a day, right? What Lucho did, that individual brilliance, and it wasn't just even skill. Number one, he's doing it all the time. You see him dancing by defenders all the time. But the way he's timing, the way he adjusts his body position, his subtle balance on the ball, it shows really all the tools that make him the league MVP. And so I think hands down, even if I can try to remain neutral, which I really can't, Lucho's goal was absolutely the goal of the year. It's a goal that only a few players can do. I mean, you saw Cartagena in Orlando hit that same goal that Martinez did in Philadelphia, right? Because these guys are professionals. They can hit a ball if you give them time and space. Yeah. Now, if he's doing that day in and day out, then, he becomes an MVP candidate. And then maybe one of his most spectacular goals is like, yeah, but this is what he does. Not just like, wow, he got hold of that one time.
Yeah. Well, like this, the Columbus center back from this weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
From way out there.
Yeah, and it happens. And that's one of the arguments against Sporting Kansas City, right? Is that they scored against St. Louis from outside the box with all those wonder strikes. But again, when you defend the way that St. Louis does, and it's all based on system, you don't have that quality of like an Obi Wobodo that's going to be in people's faces all the time. It's really like if there's a breakdown in the system, one person's out of spot a little bit, you have those calls from outside the box go in. Bryan, I had so much fun. I'm so glad that you joined me. I would have been lost trying to do this without you. I'm glad that you guys let me do this live. I hope that I can get some of these download numbers from Talking Tactics up. You guys get like 1,000 downloads on the main show. And I want to get just close to that. I just need to ride your coattails a little bit, Bryan.
Oh, Coach, you have a great product, man. We love you here, guys. Make sure to go check them out. This is probably going to be on the main feed this week on CST, but go check out Talking Tactics with Coach Gough. Download it, rate, review it, share it if we can. We can't let Coach walk away, so we're not going to let that happen, guys. So keep him around a little bit. Show him some love. So.
And who knows, I might even move back to Cincinnati. So,
yes,
but for now,
you don't tease me like that. Don't tease me like that.
I'm looking for jobs. We'll see. You gotta, find some jobs, and I've got job offers out here, not there yet. So we'll have to see. But for now, that is it for this episode, this very special live episode of Talking Tactics with Coach Gough. Like Bryan said, do me a huge favor and get subscribed to the podcast. Make sure you rate and review over at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/Coach Apple Podcasts. And other than that, thank you all for being here. Thanks to my co-host, Bryan Weigel. And thanks as always to producer Charles, who, if you're hearing this on the feed, has done some magic for me and made me sound much better. You know what? I had fun today, and I'm hoping you did too. This is Coach Brad Gough reminding you that soccer is a privilege. So whether watching, coaching, or playing, don't forget to smile.